Philosophy at the University of Colorado and emeritus professor of physics at the University of Hawaii. He's held visiting positions on the faculty of the University of Heidelberg in Germany, Oxford in England, and the University of Florence in Italy. Dr. Stenger's research career spanned the period of great progress in elementary particle physics that ultimately led to the current standard model. He also helped pioneer the emerging fields of very high-energy gamma ray and neutrino astronomy. In his last project before retiring, Dr. Stenger collaborated on the underground experiment in Japan that showed for the first time that the neutrino has mass. The Japanese leader of the project shared the 2002 Nobel Peace Prize in Physics for this very important discovery. Dr. Stenger has had a parallel career as an author of 10 critically acclaimed popular-level books that interface between physics, cosmology, philosophy, religion, and pseudoscience. In his 2007 book, God, the Failed Hypothesis, How Science Shows That God Does Not Exist, was a New York Times bestseller and a good book, by the way, too. His most recent book is The Fallacy of Fine-Tuning. His next book, and I understand that it's out now, God and the Folly of Faith. Right. The Incompatibility of Science and Religion will be out in April if it's not out already. And with that being said, I would like to welcome Dr. Victor Stenger to the stage. Now, Dr. Stenger will do a presentation on God and science, and afterwards we'll take a short break for anybody who wants to go to the restrooms, which are just outside the door, and then we'll come back and he'll take the questions from the audience.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. It's great to be here. The title of my talk is Science and God, and I hope that we can cover it in about a half an hour, which will leave plenty of time for questions. Now, it's commonly believed that science has nothing to say about God, that it can't prove or disprove the existence of God. Now, while it's true that we can't prove or disprove the existence of every conceivable God, this is not the case for a God with the attributes of the Abrahamic God, the God worshipped by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Such a God is believed to play such an important role in the universe that his effect on the lives of humans should have been strong enough to have been detected by now. Now, even the most pious believer has to admit that there's no scientific evidence for God. If there was, it would be the textbooks, along with the evidence for neutrinos and DNA. But then they say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. However, this isn't always true. Absence of evidence can be evidence of absence when the evidence that's absent should be there. The absence of evidence for elephants in Rocky Mountain National Park, droppings, crushed bushes, and so on, can be taken as a good sign that elephants don't exist in Rocky Mountain National Park. Let me cite some examples of the absence of evidence for the Judaic, Christian, Islamic God. If such a God existed, we should see evidence that he answers prayers. Reputable scientists from reputable institutions, such as the Mayo Clinic and Harvard and Duke universities, have done carefully controlled experiments on the efficacy of prayer and found none. With billions of prayers being said every day, you would think that by now a few would have been answered. Excuse me just a second. I want to increase the magnification here. Here, that's better. Most religions teach that in addition to our physical senses, we possess another inner sense that provides knowledge of a world beyond the natural world. If God reveals truths by such means, we should be able to verify at least some of those truths. For example, if God inspired the Bible, you would think he would have provided it with correct information about the world. In fact, the story of creation in Genesis bears no resemblance to what we have learned from science. Many people claim to have had religious experiences. Now, if God or the supernatural is glimpsed in a religious experience, we should be able to confirm that by some verifiable fact. For example, someone might return from a religious experience with knowledge of an impending disaster that no one could have predicted, which then takes place on schedule. Nothing of that sort has ever happened. No one predicted the Japanese tsunami or the recent tornadoes in the Midwest until some scientific evidence appeared. One of the major examples of religious experiences for which people claim empirical support is the so-called near-death experience. This phenomenon has attracted a large number of investigators who even have their own peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Near-Death Experience, Near-Death Studies. Such experiments go back 40 years. By the early 1970s, resuscitation technology had advanced to the point where many more people were being brought back from the brink of death than ever before in history. Perhaps 20% of those reported seeing a narrow, dark tunnel with light at the end and feelings of warmth and serenity that convinced them they were experiencing a glimpse of heaven. Many said they met with Jesus. If they were Buddhists, they met with Buddha. And they departed loved ones. No doubt those having these experiences were deeply moved. These reports began to attract attention of nurses and physicians who decided to study it. However, after 4 decades of effort, the near-death experience has been determined fairly conclusively to be all in the head. Many features of the near-death experience, especially the tunnel vision, can be simulated with drugs, electrical impulses, or acceleration, such as during a ride in a centrifuge that's used for training fighter pilots. In this case, the case of acceleration, the tunnel vision goes away when goggles are worn that apply pressure to the eyes, indicating that the effect is related to the lowering of blood pressure in the eye. For almost 2 centuries, scientists have searched for evidence that humans are more than purely material beings. Psychics and spiritualist mediums that claim to speak to the dead or possess other powers such as ESP or mind over matter have been totally discredited. No properly controlled experiment in psychic research in all that time, 200 years almost, has ever provided a significant replicated case evidence for the special powers of the mind that you would expect if the mind had some non-material aspect. On the other hand, considerable evidence exists in support of the hypothesis that what we call mind and consciousness result from mechanisms in a purely material brain. If we have disembodied souls that are responsible for our thoughts, dreams, personalities, and emotions, then they should not be affected by drugs. But they are. They should not be affected by disease. But they are. They should not be affected by brain injuries. But they are. As brain function decreases, we lose consciousness, as when under full anesthesia. Why should that be if consciousness resides in an immaterial soul? Brain scans today can locate the portions of the brain where different types of thoughts arise, including emotions and religious feelings. When that particular part of the brain has been destroyed by surgery or injury, these types of thoughts disappear. Now, of course, if we wanted to, God could appear before us at any time, perform a few miracles to prove his existence. That would be kind of crass, so let's assume he's more subtle. He could deliberately hide from us. Some theologians make the argument that God needs to be devious so that we will accept him on faith. Now, why he would do that escapes me. The perfect God doesn't need to create a universe with troublesome human beings, since he's already perfectly content. And even if he did, why would he want to spend eternity surrounded by clueless toadies? If he sought good conversation, you would think you'd prefer the company of Bertrand Russell to that of Matt Robertson. Now, many historians and sociologists have denied that there ever was a war between science and religion. Some have even claimed that Christianity was responsible for science. But they've twisted the historical facts. Greece and Rome were well on the way to modern science when Christianity interrupted its development for 1,000 years. Thankfully, the Islamic Empire was able to preserve and expand on scientific teachings, while Christendom was mired in the Dark Ages. But Islam and Christianity were both too inflexible to accommodate what followed, the explosion of science. That was hardly a product of religion. The scientific revolution in the 17th and 18th centuries in Europe happened only after the revolts against church authority in the Renaissance and the Reformation opened up new avenues of thought. Now, I don't deny that many contemporary scientists are religious, although they are a clear minority. Only 7% of the members of the elite National Academy of Sciences believe in a personal God. That's 7%. Believing scientists have compartmentalized their brains into two sections that don't talk to each other. They leave their critical thinking skills at the door. When they go to church on Sunday, on Monday morning, when they return to the lab, God never enters their equations. The reason for so much of the mistrust in science that you find in religious circles is the fundamental incompatibility of science and religion. At least fundamentalists are honest about it. They understand that they are at war with science. On the other hand, liberal and moderate believers are fooling themselves if they think they can be both religious and scientific without being schizophrenic. Fundamentalists know full well that science and the Bible disagree over the origin of the universe, the evolution of life, and other questions. Since to them the Bible is truth by definition, science is simply wrong and must be Christianized. And there's a strong, well-funded effort going on today in America to do just that. However, it seems to me that it's going to be hard to Christianize the fact that the Earth is just a tiny, insignificant planet in a universe that probably has about 10 billion trillion planets. And this is just the universe within our horizon. According to modern cosmology, an even vaster space exists beyond our horizon where light cannot reach us in the age of the universe, but still resulted from the same original Big Bang. The estimate is that the space out beyond our horizon, is 100 orders of magnitude greater than our visible universe with its 100 billion galaxies, and each with 100 billion stars. And so here we are on this tiny little planet. And this is what seems to me to be hard to Christianize.